Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah. One of the most incredible aspects of Palestine to me is the way that Salah ad-Din came back and gave justice to the city after it had experienced 88 years of oppression under colonial rule, under the Crusaders. The Crusaders, when they came in, they killed everybody. They killed other Christians, even though they claimed that they were going on a holy war for Christianity. They killed any Christians that were not part of their group or their denomination. These are European Christians coming into Palestinian Christians and murdering them. They murdered Jews, they murdered Muslims, they murdered everyone. And when we read history books, there are so many descriptions of the ways that the Crusaders ate babies, how they the blood was flowing in the streets, and it went all the way to the knees of the horses. When you visit Jerusalem, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala honor us all with going to Aqsa over and over, Ya Rabbil Alameen, Allahumma harrir masjid al-Aqsa, Ya Rabbil Alameen, Ameen, Ya Rab. When you see the stones and you walk in that area and you know that this is the same place that's been walked upon by prophet upon prophet, by righteous upon righteous, and also where so many people have been martyred in the name of whatever holy circumstance circumstance is the wrong word, but people have been martyred so over and over and over in the centuries there. However, when Salah ad-Din came, he brought justice to everyone in the city. When you read the descriptions of those who spoke about the justice and the peace that he brought, it was not just for Muslims, it was for everyone. And this is something that our dear brother Mansour Shuman, who may Allah protect him and all of the people of Gaza, he's a Canadian citizen who has been reporting live from Gaza, and he has been kidnapped by the Israel occupation forces. He always spoke and speaks about freedom for all of us, for every person who is experiencing injustice. When Salah ad-Din went into the city, he did so in a victorious moment. However, he didn't just show up and that happened. I've mentioned before, and I don't know if you're aware, that the way that Salah ad-Din came about was actually through a process. What happened in the time of the Crusaders is they entered, and that massacre I just described, there were a few refugees who escaped. They ran away from the city of Jerusalem. And when they ran away, they went into Syria, where there was an imam who was teaching. They are refugees with tattered clothes on their backs, traveling and seeking safety. And there was an imam there who was teaching a halaqah who suddenly sees that these men are coming in. They describe to him what happened, and he goes and he tries to get an audience with the Khalifa at the time. Now, unfortunately, similar to our circumstances today, as a Muslim ruler, this individual did not even give audience to this imam. And so do you know what the imam did? He went in Ramadan to Baghdad, to the biggest masjid in Baghdad, where he knew that this ruler was sitting and listening to the khutbah behind the scenes. There was a special place for the ruler to sit. And this imam went to the front of the masjid in Ramadan, and he started to eat while the khutbah was going on. What do you think your reaction would be if someone walked to the front of the masjid in Ramadan and the imam was giving the khutbah and people are watching this guy and he's standing right next to the imam and he starts to eat? How do you think that the crowd would react? There was an uproar. And then he said, "This is your uproar for me eating in Ramadan? And your brothers and sisters were slaughtered in Aqsa?" Now, it was 88 years from this point until the point when Salah ad-Din came back in. And in that time period, there was an educational campaign to help people begin to love and understand the importance of. And part of that was re-establishing a connection to the Quran and an understanding of Aqsa, of Al-Quds in the Quran. And that curriculum is where Salah ad-Din came through. So that before him, Imaduddin and then Nuruddin, when they set the foundation for freeing Aqsa, Salah ad-Din was ready. We are in this middle time period right now. Imaduddin before Nuruddin didn't see Aqsa. Nuruddin didn't see Aqsa. But they set the stage for Salah ad-Din to be able to go in with peace and prosperity for everyone, regardless of religion. Now, that curriculum that Salahuddin went through, because he wasn't religious from the very beginning, it was a process of his reconnection. And something I think is very important for us to all recognize. Right now, we see someone say, MashaAllah to that person, Tabarakallah to that person, MashaAllah to that person, Astaghfirullah to those people. What if the people we are saying Astaghfirullah to those people? What if one of them or all of them are the people who are going to change in some part of their life? Maybe because they're touched by your story. Maybe they're touched by the way that you interacted with them. Maybe they felt welcome at one point. And they may be the person who, like Salahuddin, does something like Salahuddin. But we would not be able to recognize them because that's not our perception of piety. Who Salahuddin was before was not our perception of who Salahuddin became. The way Salahuddin became Salahuddin, one of those connections was Quran. He would say that as important as the people who were protecting the innocent against the crusaders, as important as them were the people who were making dua for them in the middle of the night. That there is a connection, that there is a responsibility upon all of us to make dua in the middle of the night or in the middle of the day or whenever you can. Because when you feel so helpless, it doesn't mean that Allah isn't taking those dua and putting it in a place that we may not be able to see yet. We may never see in our lifetime. But they are being recorded and they are being saved, or they are being accepted in a way that we may not necessarily be able to perceive, but is truth. One of those ways that the curriculum of Nizam al-Mulk that he set, the focus was this reconnection to the Quran. And what I'd like to share with you is actually a story. Last Sunday, I did an event with Dr. Rania Awad and Ustada Suzanne Durrani. And Dr. Rania and Ustada Suzanne, Tabarakallah, they have their ijazah in the 10 qira'at. And they were telling us how they did it. They had both completed their ijazah in Hafs 20 years prior to completing their ijazah in the qira'at. 20 years prior, they both at the same time, in the same way, received their certification in one qira'ah of the Quran in memorization 20 years ago. And subhanAllah, at the time, Dr. Rania mentioned that there are so many scholars in Syria who are women who have authored books on Quran and authored books in all Islamic sciences. And she showed us the mushaf that she's holding. And it's a mushaf of the 10 qira'at. And it's this huge mushaf that shows all the different ways to recite the Quran. And she said that the person the scholar who wrote this, when she gave her the mushaf, she told her that this is for you. And Dr. Rania at the time was in medical school, and she was like, she has no idea when she's going to have the opportunity to do the 10 qira'at. That's like, it's like a very, very intense study and a very intense process to get your ijazah in the 10. And she said that she walked past that book for 20 years until it was time for her to do the 10. And Ustada Suzanne had a very similar story. And the reason I want to share their stories with you is, one, many of you know them. They're modern day examples, mashallah, of women who are doing incredible work and who have this deep connection with the Quran. But two, it took them 20 years before they were able to complete what they wanted to do, or were suggested, or someone made dua for them to do 20 years later. You may already have been trying to work with the Quran for the past 20 years, and you may feel like, at one time you were more righteous than you used to be. Or you may look back at a time in your life and think, I wish I was like that. I wish I had the time I had back then. Or you may just feel like you'll never be able to surmount the way that you feel right now. Maybe you're in a stage of life where you have a very young child or young children, and you just don't have the time to shower on your own, let alone spend hours upon hours upon hours studying Quran. Maybe you, like our dear, dear, dear brother, are processing something that is, affects every part of your life, like your health. And of course, mashallah, our dear, amazing brother said that he recites the Quran at that time. And that is so beautiful. That is your connection to the Quran. Bringing in the Quran does not have to look like I'm going to study it from 9 a.m. until 9 p.m. Bringing in the Quran so that we have a connection to the Quran as an ummah looks like being intentional in our relationship with it. Now, that's going to look different for different people. So, for example, you may be someone who has time and is like, I don't really know what to do with my time, but I do want to have a better connection with the Quran. Yes, enroll in a course, enroll in tafsir, enroll in finding a teacher and memorizing. Absolutely. But you may also be someone who just doesn't have that level of commitment right now. But maybe you would like to theoretically do that in the future. Make that intention. Make the intention for whatever you want and broaden that intention. I asked one of my Quran teachers yesterday, I said, do you know what dua, like I asked, can I tell you the dua that I make for you? And she said, she responded and she said, yes. And I told her, and it was related to Quran. And her response was, I've never thought of making that goal for myself, despite the fact that, mashallah, she already has ijazah in the 10 qira'ats. And she already, mashallah, has so many other things of scholarship related to Quran. Her reaction wasn't, oh yeah, I'm already planning to do that. Her reaction was, I've never made that intention. Now I need to make that intention. There is always more to go to with the Quran. So one, I want you to just think about yourself. Someone is asking about the feelings of deficiency in our efforts for Palestine and sincerely continuing to strive for ihsan and aiding them. There are so many ways that we can, and inshallah we can discuss that general question during the Q&A. But a part of that I want to take is that our connection to the Quran makes a difference. Because if we are trying to live the Quran, when I was reciting Surah An-Nisa to Shaykh Abdullah Deeb, there's an ayah that talks about the people who are just with their covenants. They are just with their leadership. They are just in the way that they interact with people. And he pointed to this ayah, just this one ayah. And he said, if we all implemented this one ayah, if the Muslim leaders implemented this one ayah, we would not have injustice in our ummah. We would respond to injustice in a completely different way. If someone is being unjust to us, how are we going to respond? That one of the ways truly that we can help this ummah in all parts of it is looking at the people who are taking the Quran when they are going through horrors we can't even ever express in our wildest nightmares, and then take from that and apply it into our own lives. So one, I'd like for all of us to take a moment and make an intention with the Quran. Maybe your intention is you want to memorize the whole Quran during your lifetime. Maybe your intention is you want to understand the tafsir of Surah Al-Fatiha, every single letter, every single harakah. You want to understand why Allah has a fatha on top of that letter instead of a kasra. Why did Allah use a dhamma instead of a fatha? Why? Or maybe your intention is that you want to create a workbook for children where they can connect to the Quran through coloring. And the only way that you can well, not the only way, but one of the ways that you can produce something like this is that you are going to have a very deep connection with Juz' Amma. You are going to listen to every podcast you can get your hands on about Juz' Amma, and then you're going to make this production. Whatever you see that you seek for the Quran, and you may feel like it's not enough. What I want you to know is that when you make the intention for the Quran, whether or not you complete that intention, the fact that you make it and the fact that you even try, Allah already has written you of those people. Allah already writes you as a person of the Quran when you make the intention to memorize it. So even if you don't finish, even if you don't get to where you wanted to go, but you are trying, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala writes you as a person who did. There are people who memorize the Quran in their 80s. One of my Quran teachers, Sheikh Muhib, I would watch a Yemeni grandmother come in. She would bring her grandchildren to memorize Quran with him, and she would sit in the corner. And then after their class, she would recite to him. And she was in her 80s, mashallah. There are stories of men and women who memorized the Quran in the 80s, in their 90s. And one of the masters of Quranic recitation of our more contemporary time was Shaykha Saad, who into her 90s, men and women from around the world would travel to her to get ijazah from her because she had one of the shortest sanads, actually the shortest sanad in her time period, in a particular qira'ah of the Quran. There is no time in our life where we have done enough, or where we can say that we need more ideas, I guess, of how to connect with the Quran. Because there is a way that we can bring it into every aspect of our lives. So, one, just take a moment to make the intention that seeing what's happening in Gaza, seeing what's happening in Sudan, seeing what's happening in the Congo, seeing what's happening in Yemen, seeing what's happening in all different parts of the world, we are going to reconnect to the Quran as a means of helping this ummah change. That we are going to work on restoring justice in our own lives, praying that it's a means of restoring justice in the ummah as a whole. Number one. And number two, falling in love with the Quran is a journey, just like falling in love with someone is a journey. And that doesn't have to be falling in love like a spouse. Falling in love with okay, not falling in love. Okay, loving your friend, loving someone you meet for the first time. You don't just meet them normally, for the first time at a cafe and look at that person and think, I love you. Normally, it's a process. You get to know them. You start to have experiences with them. You are building a relationship with them. And that process is one that we all go through with the Quran. Now, that is a whole different discussion on how to love the Quran. But one thing I would just like to share right now, in our viewing of the Quran, often we see it as, I'm just going to sit and memorize. In Ramadan, I'm going to read as much as I can. But I want to ask you, when was the last time you laid down in bed and you were about to go to sleep and the Quran was on your pillow? When was the last time you hugged the Quran? And I'm not talking about the cultural idea of you drop the Quran and you pick it up and you kiss it. That's a very cultural practice. I'm not talking about that form of respect in that culture. I'm talking about because you just really want to express your physical love with it. How do you express love to someone? You get them gifts, you spend time with them, you use words that share how much you love them. Talk to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala about the Quran. And when you're holding the Quran and you're pouring out your heart to Allah about Gaza, about this ummah, about your personal circumstances and the heartache that you experience, because I know many of us feel like because of what's happening in Gaza, we can't, the pain, the hardship, everything in our lives doesn't compare. But I'd also like to say, obviously, that's 100% true. And also, you can still be going through hardship. You can still be going through difficulty. And because sometimes the guilt and the horror of what you're seeing and unable to help, and then you don't know how to process, sometimes it makes it even harder for you to deal with what you're dealing with in your life on a personal level because you don't have the emotional capacity for something that was already so difficult. And now the compounded amount of trauma of just being a witness to what is happening, and then at the same time navigating the tests of your personal life, all of it together can be so overwhelming. And so that's why going back to the Quran as a shifa, that the Quran is what you seek it for, is something that can help us in all of our, not only our relationships with other people, our healing, insha'Allah, and the journeys that we go through in different ways, and of course work with a professional if necessary as well, but also in our own iman, in our own feeling of faith in our connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.
Jazakallah khair, Shaykha Maryam. Just a reminder for everyone to please share your questions in the comments. And I know we have a couple and I will get to them. But as usual, my RCM audience knows how selfish I am. And I always start with my own questions because alhamdulillah, it is, there are no coincidences. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala connects people at a very perfect time. Everyone, like Shaykha Maryam had mentioned before, everyone is here for a particular reason that we don't know that, right? But we all need to be here at the same time. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that. That's why he brought us here. Alhamdulillah. My first question is, what is something that I can unsubscribe from? What would you suggest that if there's one thing I should just say no to and get it out of my life right now, forever, in order for me to help reconnect, to make that permanent connection, that consistent connection with the Quran? What would you suggest? And I'm a mom and I have a baby and I'm just letting you know. So maybe I hope this question will help other sisters as well.
The idea that Allah doesn't love you and that you're not good enough for the Quran.
I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to cry. Subhanallah. Subhanallah. I needed to hear that. I think a lot of us needed to hear that today.
I need to hear it too. My sheikh told me yesterday. So it's an important reminder for all of us. I think we're so used to putting ourselves down and beating ourselves up and feeling like we're not good enough and making a lot of excuses that are real, but also realizing that sometimes those excuses are because we're just trying to survive emotionally, um, and Allah sees all of that. And when you are struggling with a portion of your Quran, there's a reason that He wants you to spend time with those verses. It's not because He's trying to punish you away from the Quran that you're not good enough for the Quran. It's He wants you to spend more time with those verses.
Yeah. Subhanallah. Subhanallah. Jazakallah khair. I'm so glad. So glad to hear that. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. I would like to ask another question that one of our audience members has here. How do we overcome the feeling of deficiency in our efforts for Palestine and sincerely continue to strive for ihsan by aiding them?
I think all of us are in the same, many of us are in the same boat. I know that viewers can be from different parts of the world. I'm not sure about the circumstances in other countries, but I can say that at least in the United States, you know, we all know we can contact our elected officials, we can boycott, we can protest, we can write letters, we can continue to amplify on social media, we can talk to our friends, we can donate. We all know those things, and I don't know if any of us know a different one. We are all doing everything that we can within the things that we know we can do. However, do we feel deficient? Of course, because it's been months and we are still witnessing this slaughter, and we feel like, what else can we feel so hopeless. But what I want you to know is that the people in Gaza are telling us that they are watching us, they are seeing what we're doing, and that when we are going to protest and when we are sharing their work and we are tagging them in things, they see it. And they have actively expressed how much they appreciate it. They have constantly expressed how much they appreciate it. So while you may feel like your efforts are worthless, that doesn't mean that's how they see your efforts. And at the same time, most importantly, that's not how Allah sees your efforts. All we can do is everything we can do. And yes, it doesn't feel like enough. Honestly, it doesn't. It doesn't, not in the face of what's happening, of what they're doing. It doesn't feel like enough. But remember, every small thing that you do is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is witnessing and recording. And it's something that the people you are advocating on behalf of are seeing. And again, we are in the middle period. We may not see the fruit of those efforts, but keep telling yourself that you are someone who, inshallah, will aid in the rise of the next Salahuddin. That you may not be a part of that moment, but so many years had to come before that moment.
Subhanallah, subhanallah. Another question we have right here is, Salams, should we get a tajweed teacher who can teach us proper memorization rules, or do it by ourselves if we have knowledge of Arabic?
Assalamu wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I always recommend a teacher. And the reason is a few. Number one, even if someone is a born and raised Arabic speaker, native Arabic speaker, very likely 99.9% of people were not raised with Fusha, which is the Quranic Arabic. Even if you know the rules of tajweed, if you can watch videos and learn them, it doesn't mean that you're getting like the specific sound of the kasra right. So having a teacher is very important to help you ensure that you are reciting correctly and the pronunciation is correct. And the first teacher that I had, she looked at me and she said, do you want to memorize the Quran just for memorization, or do you want to memorize it correctly? And as someone who's not an Arabic speaker, a native Arabic speaker, and who had never studied tajweed before, I was like, I just want to memorize it, like not trying to like recite it. Like I don't want to spend months and months and years learning tajweed. And she's like, what's the point? What is the point of you memorizing all these things and you're not saying any correctly? So remember, the investment that you make in the beginning is so much more important than having to redo all of the surahs that you learned, at a time when your tajweed was not correct. So alhamdulillah, mashallah, there are so many organizations now that have online programs that you can memorize Quran with. In the past, if you couldn't find a teacher, you just couldn't find a teacher. But now, alhamdulillah, there are so many ways that people can connect with online. So please work with a teacher, inshallah.
And just to add to that, Shaykha Maryam, you had mentioned in one of your podcasts about your own struggle. You shared your own struggle of finding that teacher and being consistent. And that just gave me hope because you know what? It just encouraged me to not give up. Like if it really is a priority, I need to keep going and I need to keep
Yes.
revisiting this
Yes.
goal. Mhm.
Yes. And subhanAllah, thank you for mentioning that. My journey to find a teacher was so hard and it was so multi-year. Like it took me 7 years to memorize the Quran. And it was because half the time I couldn't find a teacher. And then when I would find one, they would start me back at Surah Al-Baqarah. So then you have to start all over. And at the time, there were not online classes. They didn't exist. So being able to now have access to that, you really, inshallah, you'll be able to find a teacher that even if they have to stop teaching for some reason or move away for some reason, that someone can come in and help you continue from where you left off, inshallah.
Yeah, inshallah. May Allah make it easy for all of us.
Ameen.
Inshallah. There's a question in our private chat. How do we strive to care about good deeds and compassion, which is mentioned numerous times in the Quran, when we are experiencing our own personal issues and worries and are not mentally there to be empathetic or take action?
I'm sure you've heard of the circle of influence, and there are different circles in your life that you can have an impact on. If you live alone, then you have mercy and compassion towards yourself. Many of us are not merciful and compassionate towards our own selves because we don't even know what that looks like, or we are we are in such a heightened state of emotion that our immediate response is to yell at ourselves, or it's to speak down towards ourselves. And again, our emotional state affects our spiritual connection. Now, that doesn't mean that if you are depressed, you don't have a strong spiritual connection, or if you are mad at yourself, you don't have a strong spiritual connection. What that means is the lens that you're going to look at through the world is going to affect the way that you see yourself and your connection to Allah. So sometimes if you feel like, I hate myself, I can't forgive myself for what I did, I can't believe I did that, and then you assume that that's how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is viewing you because that's how you view you. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not you. Astaghfirullah, of course. And what right do you have to hate yourself? What right do you have to imagine that He hates you? We are not prophets being told this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has constantly reminded us of exactly what you just asked, of compassion. And so, one, even if you're the only person in your own life, being compassionate to yourself is important. And then we have those people that you have a direct interaction with, your children, your parents, your siblings. Now, a lot of families have very difficult circumstances. There are families that are abusive. There are families that are estranged. There are families that have very manipulative, emotional tools to get you to do what they want you to do. And those are all very real. And that's why it's important to work with someone like a therapist if you are in a particular circumstance like that, where you can express compassionate responses in a respectful way while drawing boundaries. But that's something that you would need to look at your particular circumstance in. And then lastly, there are those that you don't really interact with on a daily level, but maybe you don't have the energy to be able to give the way that you might if you were in a very different place. And you at some point just have to accept that you can't be everything for everyone, and that the world is going to go on even if you were not doing that particular act. And that's something that can be hard because we feel like, well, if I can donate, if I can help, if I can be the one that helps, save someone, I should do it. But at the end of the day, there are other people. And sometimes when we insert ourselves into something we can't handle, we actually resent it so much that we harm not only ourselves, but the other people too. So really looking at what you can actually do and being realistic with it and realizing that all of that can be worship with the intention, including saying no. Even saying no can be an act of worship.
Absolutely. Alhamdulillah. I just want to thank you, Shaykha Maryam, for just keeping, like, oh, we have somebody who said in the comments, wait a minute. Jazakallah khair, khairin of Shaykha Maryam for keeping it real. Yes.
Oh, thank you.
So thank you for always keeping it real. And I just wanted to, I'm not like, yes, I am actually, yes, I am promoting the Karya app. I'm totally promoting the Karya app. But I just want to keep bringing that up because I know there's a couple of people who asked me, I got the same question twice about where to start. I'm going to tell you where to start. I mean, for us, it's the Qarya app. It really
Oh,
is, like, because I'm a mom of 3 girls, and that was revolutionary. Coming from a Desi family, Desi American culture, we know there's contaminations in the, when it comes to Islam in all cultures, but I can only speak for mine. Um, so that was absolutely revolutionary for me and my family. And what a beautiful time, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knew that we were ready for this. So for anyone who is a woman who has, or anyone who has a woman in their or girls in their lives, that's basically everyone, please, please do start listening to a Quran, right? Just listening to it is, I would say, the first step, just first step, right? So you can also share, I mean, I should ask the question to be fair to everyone. So Shaykha Maryam, what is that first step to reconnect with the Quran? In parentheses, in our families, with our families.
with your family. Jazakallah khairan for mentioning Qariya. And Qariya, inshallah, in Ramadan, we're going to have an update that will help you so much more. And inshallah, by next year, it'll be a different, in a better, beneficial way, a different kind of an app in a good way, inshallah. Thank you for using it. Thank you for loving it. Thank you for your kind shout out for it. It's a free app, everyone, in case you're looking for a free app. Thank you, Brittany. That being said, what is a way that you can just start? So it really depends on you. If you don't know Arabic, if you don't know how to read it, or if you do know how to read it but you don't understand it, read the translation. The translation was the way I started reading, connecting to the Quran, and the way that I really decided, like, I want to pursue this. I could barely read the Arabic. I didn't understand any words except like Jannah. And reading the translation is what changed my life. So one, read the translation. Dr. Mustafa Khattab is right now my favorite translation. It's called the Clear Quran. And he even has, you mentioned families, he has kids translations of the Quran, where it's pictures and stories, and it's the Clear Quran. You can go to the website and find kids translations as well. So number one, just reading the translation. Number two, listening to it. Find a reciter you love their voice and just listen. And the more that you listen, the more that those verses are going to come up for you. I've mentioned the story on Celebrate Mercy before at some point, so I'm sorry if anyone's heard it before. But when I first went to Egypt, I didn't know any Arabic, and I went to Egypt so I can learn Arabic. And the teacher put me in a higher level than I actually was. And when she actually spoke to me for the very first time, because I had taken a written test, when she spoke to me for the very first time, she said, "I don't understand how you're in level 3. You know no Arabic. Like, you should be in level 0." And I was like, "I don't know." And then months later, she said, "I understand now. Every word from the Quran, you know, but everything else you don't. I don't know how to conjugate verbs. I don't know anything else. But Quran, I was reading the translation and listening to the Arabic so often that I started to pick out words." So don't look at this journey as a journey where you want to memorize in 1 year, especially if you're not a native Arabic speaker. And I remember in Egypt, there was this imam who was, I think he was like 28. He was only a few years. I think when I was in Egypt, I was 21. And I thought, subhanAllah, he is so much, he's not that much older than me, but he's so much more knowledgeable. And I went back to my teacher and I told her that. And she said, "It's not fair of you to compare yourself to someone who was born and raised in Egypt, who is a native Arabic speaker, who has had access to Quran as a man, especially access to particular scholars of Quran." And that doesn't mean that there are not women scholars. Of course there are. That's a different discussion. That doesn't need to be different. But the point is, his access in every way is different than mine. And don't compare yourself to someone else, but make the goal for you. You make the goal for you and tell yourself it's okay if you reach it in 30 years. May Allah bless you with the health and the life and the energy to reach it in 10 years, in 5 years, in 30 years. Just make the goal and then make a plan, whether it's a very small plan, like this year, I'm going to learn the Arabic alphabet, or a bigger plan. Within the year, I'm going to read the whole translation of the Quran in 6 months, but make a plan. And once you've achieved that, go to the next step, inshallah.
Inshallah. Inshallah. Jazakallah khair, Shaykha Maryam. I would like to add in one more question because my girls insisted. So we have in our homeschooling family, in our little family of Muslim weirdos, we love asking each other, "Hey, what are you learning this week?" right? Instead of like, oh, do this, do that. Like, what do you plan on learning this week? So I would like to ask you on behalf of my girls, Shaykha, what are you into these days? What are you exploring?
I can tell you. So I've been writing a book on women's issues for the past 5 years, and yeah, inshallah. So it's like every verse or every hadith that's authentic that someone has, like, not every single one, but it's like someone has a doubt about. And alhamdulillah, I've already finished most of the writing, but I went back and I finished the writing, alhamdulillah. I went back and I read one of the chapters. It was about the hadith on a nation will not be successful if a woman is their leader. And I have this whole chapter I've written about the explanation of the hadith and its implementation, all these things. And I reread it and I was like, it's just missing something. So what I'm doing now is researching in history when women have been in leadership positions, but the scholars' reaction. How did the scholars of the specific area, for example, there's in Aceh, Indonesia in the 1600s, they all of a sudden didn't have any men who could take on being the king. And the scholars came together to discuss how a woman could be the queen. But they were like, how can a woman be the queen if she can't lead the salah? And then they were like, well, she could appoint a leader, just an imam. She can appoint an imam, so he can do that. She can appoint other people to do the things she can't do, and she can still be the ruler. That is how the scholars of their time period negotiated or navigated the idea of a woman being a supreme ruler of an area. Of course, that's different from a khalifa. This is a long discussion. However, the point is, I'm looking at empirical studies on this issue this week.
That is amazing. And we are totally asking Brother Tariq to let us do another session just on this.
Oh, inshallah.
Inshallah, this is amazing. And I totally regret not asking you first. So we could have just had this discussion.
Oh, no, not at all.
And this is amazing. We're so excited, so excited to get my hands on this book, and no pressure, but please hurry up. I have a tween.
Please just make dua for it. It's been a long process.
Yes, inshallah. We have lots of dua. Again, totally for, alhamdulillah, it's so amazing that when we are selfish, I want everybody to become a little selfish for our girls, right? These are all of our girls.
Yeah.
When I say my girls, I mean all of my girls, right? In the ummah. Mm-hmm. So inshallah, so excited for that. It is always a pleasure to have you here. May Allah bless you and your family.
And you too. It's an honor to be here. May Allah bless you so much.
May Allah, oh my gosh, just accelerate this book.
Ameen, Ya Rab, Ya Rab. Ameen. Give us victory everywhere. Give us success everywhere. Bless every single one of you and every dua that you all make for you and your families, and give Gaza and all of this ummah justice and freedom, Ya Rab. Ameen.
Ameen. Ameen. Assalamu alaikum.
سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله.